I started reading Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11 on January 3rd. I was on a plane flying back from New York to Mexico, where I had spent a week as disconnected from the world at large as I could possibly be. For those who don't know, Station 11 is a 2014 novel that follows a few tangentially related characters through the end of the world, one brought on by a mysterious disease that has a mortality rate of well over 90%. That disease begins its spread on an international flight, making my choice of venue a little unsettling. But far stranger was getting off the plane, plugging back into the world, and learning about a new, highly infectious virus in China. It's an odd but meaningless coincidence, of course, but I'm not going to lie. Station 11 impacted the way that I have thought about the events of the last couple of months, and not for the better. It's an excellent book, but not one I particularly recommend at this point in time, and Mandel herself agrees with that. But a pair of movies have stuck out in the hashtag discourse: Steven Soderbergh's 2011 film Contagion and Wolfgang Petersen's Outbreak from 1995. I was a bit young to have seen Outbreak at the time and never really felt compelled once I wasn't. And my experience with Contagion began and ended with the giant billboard that sat at the end of the then existent construction of the High Line. That I framed a story for a journalism class around that billboard and the way that the High Line just pushed you towards it. But I never saw the movie until last week, when I saw both of them, because everything is shut down and I've got a lot more time to watch things at home. And it seemed like an inappropriate, in a fun way, time to see some fictional depictions of the world-altering event that we're in the middle of. And one of them was kind of fun. The other, not so much. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me isolated, because today I'm talking about why. In any other context, it wouldn't make much sense to talk about these films in the same breath, despite the fact that they are both disaster movies with stacked casts about the world's reaction to some mysterious disease that is extremely communicable and tremendously deadly. They have very little in common. Outbreak is hella 90s Hollywood. It opens with the firebombing of an African village and somehow escalates from there. Or decades later, a monkey hosting the disease they tried to eradicate with that explosion brought to the US. In the process, it infects people with said disease and they die. All of them. It has a 100% mortality rate. At the same time, an arrogant army doctor goes rogue because he believes that he's the only one who can save the world. And wouldn't you know it, he's right. There's no bombast in Contagion, though, which is essentially a matter-of-fact depiction of a world hit by a disease for which it is woefully unprepared. Our world. This disease appears within a matter of hours, spread through the barest traces of contact, and has a 20 to 30% mortality rate. It moves across the earth in just a few weeks, but we see the events unfold through the experiences of a handful of individuals. A guy whose wife may have been patient zero, an epidemiologist from the World Health Organization, a director at the CDC, a blogger/grifter, etc. It's not really about any one of them, but they help us keep our bearings. There is no hero, though, sadly. One man cannot just come in, find the right monkey in a little girl's backyard, and turn everything around in a matter of minutes. Contagion writer Scott Burns worked with physicians, representatives from the WHO, and others to create the most plausible depiction possible. Then the H1N1 pandemic happened during that research phase, allowing everyone to get a glimpse at how the world would react. And I know that most people feel that that was a lot of nothing. But when I was a high school senior, I went to a funeral for someone just 1 year older than me who died from H1N1. That the typical flu is generally more deadly in terms of total fatalities isn't a reason to dismiss something new. It is a reason to do more about the flu. None of us take these things seriously enough. Contagion plays more like a horror film in 2020 than the action thriller it was billed as a decade ago. I can only imagine that it felt more abstract that those introductory lingering shots of poles and glasses touched by people who are clearly sick were suspenseful then, but weren't quite the current reminders of how vulnerable we are and how little attention we pay. I've always been a little unnerved by subway poles, and so haven't put my hands on them in years, instead using my wrists if I can't just lean on something. But even with all of that, I never really thought about all of the other times that I might touch something in that system. How I swipe my Metro card, enter or exit a turnstile or gate, interact with the railings on a stairway, or maneuver around structural supports. I have put my hands on all of these things without thinking about it. But in the last 2 weeks of daily subway riding, right up until my employer sent all of us home last Tuesday, I was hyper-vigilant and saw all of those and more. And Contagion just pushed that paranoia further. Outbreak has a few moments like this, but the story is able to remain abstract even today because the disease it depicts is so out there. The visual of its victims is grotesque, with their welted bodies and bleeding eyes. It's not that diseases can't do that to people, but those are the ones that still feel far away. That is not what's happening to people now. But the sudden collapse, seizure, and arrest seen in Contagion, even if that isn't the actual way most people are dying, it feels much more real and immediate. Also of significance is the way Outbreak makes the virus a specific consequence of human actions rather than a series of unfortunate events beyond anyone's control. The people who ordered that village be destroyed in the film's opening have the treatment for the disease, but they're keeping it locked away in case the military might have use for it someday. And this is represented by Donald Sutherland at his most cartoonishly evil, and that's saying a lot. Anytime you might get spooked by thinking about the implications of such a deadly disease on the real world, you're reminded that this was effectively manufactured, and that we are in Hollywood land, and our charismatic leading man needs only make the right monologue over the radio to turn the tides. Contagion has no big bad, just as it has no hero. There are the smaller evils, like the blogger who lies about the efficacy of homeopathic remedies in order to take advantage of everyone's fear and become obscenely wealthy in the process, or the looters who are doing whatever they can to get the supplies that they believe that they need at the expense of those who may already have them. But it is all in reaction to something that perhaps could have been foreseen, but no person caused. Interestingly, both Outbreak and Contagion lay some of the big picture blame on deforestation, as the former shows how it resulted in the capture of the host monkey, while the latter reveals the bats shaken loose from the trees who would ultimately infect the world. Contagion also lays some blame on the meat industry, while Outbreak kinda does on the pet industry. But all of that is beside the point. Right now, in the world, there are a lot of arguments about how things got started, but the truth is that no one really knows. It may well have been exactly the thing that we see in Contagion's final moments, as it finally reveals to us what happened on day one. And yeah, people will believe that their open-air markets are more hygienic, but the idea that anywhere is sanitary enough to avoid that specific set of dominoes from falling is deluded. And even if there is somewhere that actually could have stopped it, it doesn't matter, because it would happen elsewhere, anywhere, at any time, for any reason. Contagion understands how unhelpful it is to blame anyone for what happened, that what matters is how we deal with it. It also reminds us how long this thing we're all going through is going to be with us. The social distancing that we should all be doing isn't something that just gets over and done with in the next few weeks. Getting a vaccine ready and approved is a long process. 12 months at the absolute minimum, with 18 much more likely, and even that still being incredibly fast by historical standards. I didn't know that before this year. Did you? Probably not. Because movies like Outbreak told us that it was just a matter of finding the host, taking some of its magical antibodies, and boom, everything is cured. The whole thing is fantasy. whereas Contagion's lottery for vaccine distribution feels like a warning. But maybe it's not. The difficult thing about watching Contagion in 2020 is not grafting everything that we're experiencing onto what is ultimately fiction. It may feel like stepping into the scariest headlines from around the world, but we're nowhere near an actual societal collapse. Yet the global response to our pandemic isn't so radically different, and that worms its way into your brain, not making you wonder if you should keep your distance from people, but making you worry about whether you need the means to defend yourself for when, not if, people start looting. Outbreak, on the other hand, is so far removed from our experience that you can just get caught up in the exciting set pieces and not think about it. It's the good kind of apocalypse for right now, the one that doesn't remind you of the chaos happening outside your window. But Contagion, yeah, maybe it's best to hold off on that one. Watch it when this is all in our rear views. Whenever that is. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hammer and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, @BlasianFMA, Magnolia Denton, and Elliot Fowler. If you like this video, it's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.